How's it going, everyone? We are reviewing FanDuel tight ends in this episode. I am Russell Clay. You can find me on Twitter at Russell J Clay, and I'm here with my buddy Jason. You recently wrote the FanDuel tight end analysis, so I guess we're gonna run through a FanDuel tight end slate that I'm actually more excited about than DK this week.
Yeah, I'm certainly in agreement. I mean, obviously, you're going to get Jordan Reed in the main slate. I know you like a value there and called Vance McDonald out there in San Francisco. So, yeah, there's definitely a couple options that you're missing. But, yeah, I mean, I think with that being said, cash games, I mean, it's hard not to like Jordan Reed, and there's certainly a lot of value on the slate that you can go ahead and just pay up for him. 7,400, not a bad price. I mean, a drop down from Gronk, who may or may not even play this week. But looking at Reed, I mean, 8.1 targets per game last season. That was second to Delaney Walker. At home, Kirk Cousins does play much better at home than he does on the road. So that obviously has a little bit of an influence on Reed. Caught 7 of his 11 touchdowns there. Football Outsiders did rank Pittsburgh 5th in covering tight ends, but they gave up the 8th most fantasy points per game, so obviously you can kind of go either way on that. I'm kind of expecting maybe a little bit of a shootout here, so I think that kind of bodes well for Reed. And obviously, given the fact that he is their top target, I don't see really any way of going anywhere else in cash games unless you just kind of want to drop down.
It really did seem, a little hyperbolic when people were comparing Jordan Reed to Aaron Hernandez coming out of college. And it's just there was no hyperbole at all. That's just what he is, he plays that role. He's awesome in that role. My only worry, I suppose not in this matchup. I do like him as a cash game option this week. I just wonder how those targets are going to get split up because – I mean, I like Deshaun Jackson. I like Pierre Garçon. I like a healthy Josh Doxson. Is Reed the number one in that offense? Absolutely. I just think this week, yes, cash, especially against this Pittsburgh defense. I just want to caution going forward. We might have to worry about Jordan Reed in a few weeks, though.
I certainly agree. I mean, obviously, you look at him. I mean, last year led the team in targets, 20% of the team's targets. This year, I don't see him kind of hitting that mark. I do think he takes a step back. In terms of red zone targets, though, I think he's still going to be a safe option. But, yeah, I'm definitely in agreement. I think going forward, we will certainly have to kind of gauge that and keep that kind of on our radar.
Certainly. And I wrote him up on DK, and I think we're both on pretty much the same page with Zach Ertz here. Pretty cheap salary for sure.
Yeah, 5,700 against a Cleveland defense that was middle of the road against tight ends last year. You look at Ertz, I mean, over the final 4 weeks of the season, 56 targets over that span. I mean, he was really targeted heavily. Obviously, a lot has changed. No Chip Kelly, no more Sam Bradford. But I don't think his role is going to change all that much. I think it's going to stay relatively similar. And you can also toss in the narrative. Obviously, tight ends are safety blankets for inexperienced quarterbacks, which, yes, that's true. But I just look at Ertz, and I think for that price tag, he's still going to put up a reasonable amount of fantasy points, even with kind of a lot of uncertainty in that offense. And I do kind of like him inside the red zone. So really, him and Matthews, I mean, are kind of the only viable options in terms of that passing game as far as targets that I'm really looking to take a shot at.
Right, Carson Wentz starting, and I mean, you're looking at to put it this way, and I think pretty simply, Ruben Randall was the number 3 receiver there for some of training camp and maybe even week 1 of preseason, and he's literally not on the team anymore. I mean, if that doesn't define what their secondary options look like, then I don't know what does. So I think it's going to be Ertz and J-Matt, and I don't really see anyone else making an impact unless Nelson Aguilar's back, returning punts or kicks.
Yeah, I mean, you got Dorial Green-Beckham who came on his way over, but, we'll see where that kind of pans out. I'm not really going to just be inserting him in and saying he's making a tremendous difference yet.
No way.
So. In terms of GPP tight ends, I feel like this one it's either you're on or you're kind of just going, no, I don't feel like it. Colby Fleener, 5,400. A decent matchup against the Raiders defense that was really subpar against tight ends last year. Obviously, Fleener was kind of in a situation in Indianapolis where he was dealing with a lot of 2 tight end sets where Allen would take some of the shares away from him. You go back to 2014, I mean, a respectable 750-yard season, 8 touchdowns. not bad. And obviously that's kind of in line where, okay, he was a GPP play some weeks. And I feel like going into New Orleans, last year, Drew Brees, when he had a healthy Jimmy Graham, 26% of the completions came from a tight end. Last year, you look at Benjamin Watson, Josh Hill. Obviously, I do think Fleener is a step up from those duo, but in the red zone, both those guys combined for 36% of the targets. I
I
still think Fleener in the red zone is going to be that guy.
I like Fleener. I have cooled a tad bit. I won't say a lot. I am slightly worried about the little mice who sneak out of practice and are reporting that he's been struggling. As far as Fleener himself, I like the situation. And you brought up that 2014 season, and that's really when I became a truther. In like weeks 11 to 17 that year, he was like tight end 2 in that span. I mean, he was pretty much an every week starter. And people only remember that wide open, catch he dropped that would have gone for a touchdown. But I mean, in that game, I forget who it was against, but he had like 150 receiving yards in that game. So, I mean, that's kind of been his career. Underrated as a player, I believe. And I think he'll be underrated in this offense. Though I am cooling a little bit. I do like this price a lot as a GPP.
Right. As you mentioned, there are reports that he's come out and really hasn't, developed fully. We're not sure what we're going to get from him, but I think that kind of also feeds into the GPP narrative that you can build for him, because I still think that ceiling is very high for a 5,400 price tag.
Absolutely. And you have a guy in GPPs that I'm kind of looking at in cash. Gary Barnidge. I cash on DK, I should say.
Right, and I totally agree with Barnidge and Cash on DraftKings. Obviously, his price was pretty low. You lose Jordan Reed, you lose a couple other guys as far as tight ends. So I think that's why I just kind of tossed him in here in terms of GPPs on FanDuel. A little bit more expensive at 6,300, but as we saw last year, 9 touchdowns. This guy does have a very high ceiling. Only had 4 weeks last year where he was targeted less than 7 times. Obviously, this year it could be a little bit different given that they're going to have Corey Coleman, Josh Gordon, but I think the efficiency could take a bump if we get kind of a decent RG3 there under center. And obviously, we're still not sure what we're even going to get from Robert Griffin. So I think that kind of puts it in where at that price, I'm going to lean on him more in tournaments. I think in cash games, I'd rather go spend up to Reed or actually take the discount with Ertz in that same game.
And again, with FanDuel, it's 0.5 PPR instead of 1 on DK. And one of the reasons I like him on DK is because I'm fairly certain of his role in the offense. And I mean, catches for 60 yards on DK isn't killing you. 5 catches for 60 yards on FanDuel is kind of like, well, it wasn't horrible, but like I'm not, that's not optimal by any means. So, yeah, I think that's kind of what we're looking at here.
Yeah, definitely. You are. The scoring and pricing is a little bit different, which is why I think we just kind of flipped them. Still a great play. We just flipped them in terms of the sites. But I do like him a lot.
And your punt here, a guy I've been kind of jokingly throwing out there for, I don't know, a month and a half, which is Clive Walford against the Saints. I mean, it's not really a joke, but I like to joke about it. But it actually is a really good play.
4,700. How can you kind of go wrong with taking a shot there? You can stack another position. Obviously, the matchup's perfect. You look at New Orleans. I don't expect them to just immediately be good against tight ends. They really struggled last year. And looking at this game, you got a total north of 50. Can't go wrong there. You expect both teams to be slinging the ball around. In the talents there for Walford, it was kind of more just the targets and more getting him on the field last year. And there are talks about that improving in 2016 and him being a nice part of this offense. So with those reports, with the price, with the matchup, I'm gonna be jumping on this situation. I'm gonna be definitely taking some shots here. I'm not going all in or saying that he's an awesome cash value. He's not, in terms of that, he's not the safest play, but I do like the upside for that price.
In the same way that Richard Rodgers, last year wasn't all that appealing of an athlete, like he's really unathletic. Clive Walford's athletic profile is not that great, but his role in the offense doesn't need to be. So I think he's fine in that role. Let Crabtree and Cooper do all the heavy lifting, and then Walford's there as the third guy. So 4,700 certainly like that value against a weak or a weak Saints secondary.
Yeah, definitely.
And I suppose that's the five we're focusing on for FanDuel here. I think that's a nice array. Is there anyone else you're looking at, or is that it?
I think that's it for me. I did highlight Dwayne Allen in the Kobe Fleener write-up just because he was an old teammate. He's a viable option at his price in tournaments. That's about it, though. I'm not really looking at Delaney Walker on FanDuel. I like him more on a PPR site like DraftKings. So, yeah, I mean, that's basically the 5 or 6 I'm looking at.
Yeah, totally agree. I would have liked Eric Ebron. I was excited for him for about the 6 months prior to the start of the season, and then he got hurt. So that was fun. I wouldn't trust him week 1. So I'd just probably stick with these guys. And anyway, thanks for tuning in, and we will check you guys out next week.